Everyone, and welcome to tonight's advisory board meeting. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting, but before I do that, I will read a gentle reminder. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And with that, I would like to call the meeting to order, and we will begin with introductions. My name is Heather Watkins, and I'm chairperson.
Allegra Stout, vice chair.
Mark Mallett, treasurer.
Kyle Robidoux, commissioner. Paul Richardson, commission member.
John Winsky, commission member.
Zari Amir Hosseini, commission member.
Kristen Mahash, disability commissioner.
Okay, I think we have a couple of staff members in the audience. If they would like to introduce themselves, please.
Catherine Quigley, Architectural Access Specialist.
Christopher Murawski, Advocacy and Outreach Specialist.
Thank you.
Chanel Smitherin, Architectural Access Project Coordinator.
Welcome, thank you. Okay, and so we'll move on to the approval of the September minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read them over? I see two heads nodding, so I'm going to take that as everyone.
I make a motion that we approve the minute.
Okay,
I'll second that.
second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, September minutes pass. And we're going to move on to the chair's report. And I don't actually have a report for tonight's meeting, but I did want to say how lovely the DPC meeting was last week, the annual fundraiser, and to again congratulate Allegra, and she had a lovely speech. It was very, very well attended, very diverse, and John, wonderful, just wonderful. John is the executive director, as many of you here know. And that concludes my report, my formal report. We're going to move on to, I'm sorry, did anyone have any questions, thoughts? I didn't think so. Pretty good. We're going to move on to the commissioner's report.
And thank you, Heather. First of all, I just wanted to reintroduce our new staff person, Chanel Smitherin. She's the Architectural Access Project Coordinator. She'll be working under Catherine, reviewing documents and preparing remarks for Catherine to go over and submit for final review to the BRA, the PIC, which is the Public Improvement Commission of the city, and the AAB board, the State Architectural Access. So we welcome Chanel, and we also have some other news, and that is that Catherine will be leaving us.
Oh.
Catherine will be leaving on next Thursday, November 5th, and we're going to have a farewell party for Catherine next Thursday evening from 5 to 7 at a local restaurant. I haven't figured out which restaurant yet.
Okay.
I'll send an email.
Oh, you'll definitely be missed. Oh, and welcome, Chanel.
Okay, so my updates are, first of all, we had our annual Disability Mentoring Day 2 weeks ago. We work with Mass Rehab every year to bring in job-ready adults with disabilities and pair them with mentors in the city. This year we partnered with JetBlue instead of City Hall. So we sent 7 candidates over to Logan Airport to have a day of job shadowing, mentoring, mock interviews, and learning about job openings. So they had a wonderful experience. We had a debriefing meeting, and they don't have a ton of job openings in Boston, but they do have some customer service jobs, some maintenance jobs, things like that, transport jobs. So a few of them have already applied, and they have a foot in the door, which is the big thing. And one of them actually won a raffle for 2,000 Sky Miles, which was very impressive. It was a donation by JetBlue. So we, going forward, we will still look for corporate partners and still work with City Hall to open up job opportunities for people with disabilities. In that vein, I'm also working with the administration on the model employment program to make the city a model employer of people with disabilities. I met with the new Mass Rehab Commissioner, Nikki Osborne, 2 weeks ago, and we talked about ways to increase vocation. As we all know, people with disabilities are the lowest group of employed people in the United States, and it's something that hasn't really improved even with the ADA over the last 25 years, so something that we need to work on, and the City of Boston is committed to working on that, so that's something that I have in process. Catherine and I are continuing to monitor the WAVE, wheelchair accessible vehicle taxis. They are all scheduled to be compliant, fully ADA compliant by 2017. So we met last week with the Radio Association owners and the owners of WAVE medallions just to update the status of the program to make sure they're all on track, answer questions. There's been some pushback, but we just want to make the owners understand the necessity of it. Some people complain that they don't get any wheelchair requests for cabs, but it's kind of a catch-22. You won't get requests until people know that they're accessible. So we are planning to do some PSAs, public service announcements, and a push for information once they're all accessible so that people with disabilities will know that they can use the cabs again. We're also working on the Disability Housing Task Force, which Moses serves on. We had our final full group meeting last month, and we've decided to break down into 3 smaller committees to work on resources for people who need housing. One committee will work on developing new housing, and one committee will work on information dissemination about how to get units. So those 3 groups will meet separately, and then we'll meet one more time as a full group and give recommendations to Mayor Walsh by the end of the year. We're also working on reviewing the accessible parking program. I know we had a subcommittee on the commission who met about that a few months ago. The Inspector General will be issuing his report on the investigation at the state level of abuse of handicap parking. His report should be out anytime. It was supposed to be out in September, but it should be out hopefully, if not this week, hopefully next week. So once I review that, I'll be working with that report and the recommendations that the commission gave me to make recommendations to Mayor Walsh. And finally, I met with people from Liberty Mutual Foundation. They have some grants coming out, RFPs, to work on improving the lives of people with disabilities. So they wanted me to help make connections to nonprofits in Boston. So I mentioned BCIL. I mentioned the Multicultural Independent Living Center. They already work with Deaf Inc. They work with a lot of nonprofits already, but disability is one of their key target demographics, and they feel like they don't do enough grants for people with disabilities, so that's something that I'll put the word out. The RFP should be out in November, and it can be pretty sizable money. So we'll be
Carl?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I will definitely put that in there. Question? Oh, DPC?
John?
And that's it, if anybody has questions.
And I'm sorry, what was the RFP for?
Liberty Mutual Foundation,
Liberty Mutual Foundation.
Yep.
Okay.
they give millions of dollars every year in Boston.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're the second largest insurance company. in the
I'm sorry? I couldn't
They're
hear
the
you.
second largest insurance company in the country, Liberty Mutual, so they have a lot of money.
Yeah. They are pretty big. Okay. Any other questions?
Are the radio associations working together on dispatch accessible cabs? How's that working?
They are. They're looking to us to help improve their policies. We've been throwing out the idea of one central number to try to get people access to vehicles. What one radio association does is if they get a call for a wave, all the other wave vehicles in their fleet, their radios get shut off until the wave call gets answered. They get shut off for other calls, so that they have to take the wave job before any other calls are taken. Other radio stations don't do that, so we're trying to get some uniform best practices in place. It's going to be a while before it's all really accessible, but just these meetings and sharing information, I think, will be a big help.
Which one is
Definitely.
That is Brett. Catherine, do you know which one it was?
It was Boston Cab.
Boston Cab.
I think I have the paper here.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. And so we move on to architectural access update. Catherine, take it away.
So I will be leaving next Thursday. I'm not actually going that far. I'm going over to join system-wide accessibility at the T with Laura. So I will still be around.
Where are you going? I'm sorry.
System-wide accessibility, I'll be a technical project manager, so I'll have a similar role in that I'll be reviewing drawings for compliance
And the
Okay.
MBTA.
for the MBTA. So thank you. So as I transition, Chanel will be taking on processing and reviewing the projects that come through our office. She will be focusing more on the individual projects and less of the systemic things that I've taken on in the past couple of years. So she will be starting to engage with the advisory board again on the AAB variances, submitting those to all of you for comment, and requesting if you have comments, if you accept them, if you'd like them to be denied, or more information, etc. And so right now what we're working on is a template for her to fill out so that that information will be more easily conveyed to all of you, so you don't have to go digging as much in the actual application. And then another thing that we've been working on, that she's been working on, is updating an access calendar so that we have a better idea of all of the access opportunities that are happening through the variances, but also the Boston Redevelopment Authority. One thing that's been happening is that our office has been making comments about projects, but the advisory board hasn't really had an opportunity to weigh in on those projects. And we'd really like to see all of you be more involved with the large development that is happening throughout the city, especially considering that the mayor's housing plan is asking for 53,000 new units, which means that at a minimum 5% of those should be accessible. So one thing that has come up a lot, because I insist on it, is that we don't actually consider accessibility to be equivalent to green design, and yet it's people who have to really live in these buildings, and we're all actively aging. So whether you have a mobility impairment or otherwise now, you may someday, and I'm really hopeful that we can appeal to these developers and designers to be considerate when they're, choosing these revolving doors for energy requirements rather than the better alternative of an automatic vestibule door, which is really simple in its selection, rather than forcing people to have negative experiences. We're trying to really elevate it so that universal and ideal design is part of their process from the very beginning. So I'd really, really encourage all of you to really use your position on the commission to use your voice and comment, even if it's really simple that you like it or you don't like it or you'd like to see more of something. I really encourage you to make those comments when that opportunity comes through your inbox.
Can I just add that one of Chanel's roles will be to simplify the projects, because it is very technical now, and Chanel and Catherine are both architects, but we know that nobody on the commission is an architect, and I'm certainly not an architect. So to put it more in layman's terms, so that we can just say, what the basic project is, what like a variance they're requesting from the AAB, or what the BRA is planning to do, so you can just let us know if you support it or not. And we'll point out issues that are potential barriers to accessibility that you can weigh in, because as Catherine said, your voice is critically important to the mayor, and you have the power of being appointed by the mayor, being a city commission. So the fact that you've been writing letters recently, that goes a long way, because people really count those letters heavily when they're doing their work.
So one exciting thing that I have been working on has been an accessible pedestrian routes trip planning project. I believe Commissioner Makash had mentioned this previously. Right now, so initially it was a proof of concept through the Public Works Department to identify if it was even something that the city would be capable of creating. And the Public Works Department spent the money to build a proof of concept through a private developer to say that the information for ramps and sidewalks does exist in the city and those barriers can be mapped. So right now we have previously gone to Google and said, can you make this into a trip planning application? And they were like, there's not enough information here for us to use. So right now we've gone back and we're working with 4 seniors at Brandeis who are developing data standards for the ramps and the sidewalks so that that information can be gathered in a similar way to how transit information is uploaded into the Google Maps application. So right now, for those of you familiar with the Google Maps, they call it a geo tool, but the Google Maps application, you have the ability to choose whether you want a private vehicle route, a transit route, or a pedestrian walking route, but none of those identify barriers. So our hope is that we can, so for transit, there's a standard way to gather the information and upload it to Google. So what the students are creating is what does that standard look like and what information is needed within that standard. And we have successfully partnered with Baltimore, Houston, and San Francisco so that when the students are done identifying these standards, we can go back to Google and say, here are 4 cities that are really interested and have are willing to pursue this. And so in my absence, Chris Osgood, who is Chief of Streets, has participated from the very beginning. He was the one who contacted Google initially for those conferences. He will be taking over my role as the city contact. But he and Kristen have said I can maintain working on this project so that it doesn't lose momentum, because I think that it's really, really important to the city. And it would be such an awesome thing for us to say that we were behind, but also such a great thing for all of those users who may not know that they don't have to go down the street of Summer Street to get from South Station to the visitor center. But the other benefit of this is that when we map these routes and we have a constituent-facing tool, we'll also have the information from a public works standpoint to say these are the priority areas that need to get identified so that one pedestrian route is both accessible and direct, rather than the way our old city is currently laid out where barriers are everywhere. So I think that's really exciting and positive, and I hope you don't let it go and bring it up to everyone so that we can keep it moving. And then the last thing is there's a plan initiative through the BRA that's really working towards both an interdepartment workshop style, but also workshops within the communities. So there's 2 development studies that are currently happening. One is JP Rocks and one is Dot Ave, and I believe those were mentioned last month, and I think that we sent out the information, and I can send that out to you again. But the next JP Rocks workshop will be next Wednesday, November 4th. It's 6 to 8 p.m. at the English High Cafeteria, which is 144 McBride Street in JP. So what they're really looking for is for the community to come out and really respond to the questions. So we had an example meeting yesterday about how that's going to work, and they have a bunch of goal statements. And those goal statements really reflect sustainable design as it pertains to green building and affordable housing. So I really think as a community, if people can get out there and really raise the issue of accessibility, because as I've said, if we're building to green design, why aren't we building to ideal? But I am only one voice, so I really need the community to show up and make accessibility an issue for all these people, because the sooner you get in front of people and say, you know, these are priorities, they're more likely to respond in a positive way. So I wanted to say thank you so much for letting me work with all of you. It's really been a pleasure. I'm like really sad about it. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Catherine,
Yes.
can we,
I'm not gonna let you walk away yet.
Okay.
Carl,
You know I'm gonna ask, is the proof of concept app that you guys are working on accessible for screen readers?
No, so a proof of concept really just means that it's this very basic idea. They didn't actually develop into an application. They just basically mapped all of the barriers, and then they, even to give it back to us, they had to make it a PowerPoint. They didn't give us a data tool. So the proof of concept didn't translate into something interactive.
Okay.
So what the Brandeis students are developing is actually not a tool at all. It's merely the data standards so that
So the
Google
backbone.
can
It's
make
the
it
backbone that they're developing right now. not what
Exactly.
you can see. Okay.
exactly.
When we make the tool, it will be fully accessible.
I have to ask.
That's good.
John?
What is, there's a new phenomenon that I've noticed this summer. When a building is doing work and blocking off the sidewalk, are they supposed to go to the city and get permission to tie up the sidewalk? Temporarily rope it off?
Yeah, so when construction is happening, they're required to provide an accessible route if they're blocking off the typical sidewalk.
Because I've now come across 2 or 3 instances where buildings are power washing and stuff, and they're literally roping off the entire sidewalk, like their section of it. No police, no accessibility, so you get halfway down the block, and you like have to turn around.
So is that power washing or actual construction projects?
It's like power washing, but they're literally roping off the sidewalk and saying to the public,
So
go into the road.
Right. So code enforcement would take care of that. So if you call our office or email us, we could let code enforcement know, and then they can go out and take care of it.
Is that ISD?
No, code enforcement moved under Public Works, so it's the Public Works Department. They respond to those types of infractions.
Interestingly, they're doing it on the weekends is when I've caught them. And I
Okay.
think they know because no one is around.
Right, probably. So for construction projects, if it's ever a construction project, you should certainly let us know. The Public Works staff will respond to those issues immediately. We've had some complaints, and we have a great relationship with them in that they will go out there right away and take care of it.
Right.
So if you see a construction project, they're required to provide an accessible route, a safe, accessible route around those projects. I'll have to look into how they deal with blocks that are power washing. It could even, I'm not entirely sure
Yeah,
how we handle
one
those,
was
but
painting and 2 were power washing, and I was just in utter disbelief that they literally just
right.
set up camp and
So
that was it.
well, even here on the City Hall accessible route, or the access path to City Hall, they had scaffolding up blocking off the pathway. And so we went out and made them provide access to the asphalt, and they were happy to do that. So some of those facilities management folks just don't know better.
Yeah.
So if you let us know, we can send somebody out. Even if it's
Okay.
on the weekend, we can let someone know. So Citizens Connect, there's also 311. So if you call into them or any of us.
Citizens
That's a good thought. I had forgotten that.
Yep.
I just mumbled to myself and cursed.
Well, you have to remember that we're not out on the sidewalk all the time. So you really have to be our eyes and our voice and let us know about those issues. Hopefully in the past when you've had complaints, we've responded. So I think we'll continue to do our best.
The other day,
Thank, Carl? Go ahead.
the other day I was walking by BU, and I think it was construction over by the BU Law School on Commonwealth Avenue. And there used to be handicap spots where the construction is now taking place, but it's blocked off with scaffolding. And so I'm assuming temporarily we lost the parking spot. Is there a way to Boston track that whenever this construction takes away the handicap spots, that they come back, or are they temporarily moved, or is there a procedure in place to make sure?
The way the code is written is that when construction conflicts with a accessible space, they're required to relocate it within a reasonable amount of, like a reasonable distance.
Yeah, they're supposed to come through the city for that. Was
Yeah.
it a public space, a city space?
I think so. I'll double check.
So that's usually, Commissioner, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically if it's a straightforward case, BTD will handle it.
Yeah, I think there were spaces right on Elm Ave.
I hope you're gonna have Catherine on speed dial.
Oh, I will. Not getting away that quickly, that easily. Catherine, can you give a brief update on Go Boston?
Vision Zero?
No, the BTD. Alice?
I don't know the latest about Go Boston 2030.
We just got an email, but I think there's an event next week. I'll email out to people. They're still looking for input on transportation visioning for the future. Could you give an update on Vision Zero?
Yeah, so Vision Zero is the task force that the mayor put together to respond to traffic accidents. I don't know if you've heard about the recent crashes that have resulted in deaths, mainly for cyclists. So Vision Zero is taking a hard look at the 10 major intersections where fatalities occur. A lot are on Mass Ave, Com Ave, et cetera. And so what they're doing is they're looking at what are infrastructure changes that can be made to reduce or to increase safety so that people are moving through these intersections in a safe way. So they've gone out and done physical studies to monitor who's going through, how they're moving through, and what the responses are. So for example, a lot of intersections on Mass Ave, pedestrians just walk out into the street because the walk cycles are about 2 minutes each. So what happens is people don't want to wait. They wait maybe one time, and then after that they just run out across. But there's also cars turning and crossing, and then cyclists are also coming through those intersections. So Vision Zero is taking a hard look at what can we do as a city to change that behavior. So is it changing the rules for the cyclists to allow them to enter into intersections prior to a red light changing back to green? Is it changing the amount of time that it takes for a pedestrian walk signal to come through? Or is it painting out crosswalks and the bike lanes? For example, on, I think it's Mass Ave and Beacon, where the surgeon was unfortunately killed, is that they realize that they have massive trucks trying to take a right-hand turn, and to do that they are turning from the far lanes, which means that a cyclist doesn't know that they're coming, and then that conflict occurs. So what they've done is they've put up temporary bollards and painted out the roadway so that it's very clear where everyone's going and where they're safe and where they need to be to line up appropriately to move safely through the intersection.
Tying into that, Commissioner, I'm afraid that Public Works has fallen in love with the Apex curb cut, and more and more I'm seeing Apex curbs in Boston when the city is building curb cuts and intersections. And the AAB is pretty clear about when an Apex curb can be used. And, you know, one of the things it requires is 30 feet, I believe, of roadway. My concern is they're doing it to save money, because instead of 2 curb cuts, you got 1. But it's also putting the pedestrians literally right at the corner, so that trucks.
Do you have specific locations in mind?
I can go back and start noting them.
Because Public Works is very aware of the regulations for Apex.
Yeah.
And private developers, pretty much through Catherine's work, I mean, they all know Catherine now, and we never.
So I wouldn't say we never do. I would say that they have to prove that they're meeting one of the 4 criteria. So for an Apex ramp, you don't have to meet all 4. You have to prove that you can meet one of those criteria. So it's line of sight, it's the 30-foot radius. If there's a utility vault in the way, they can put an Apex ramp in rather than trying to relocate the utility. But I do know that there are some cases where they're taking out Apex and putting back Apex, and then they don't necessarily have to come through our office because they're putting it back in a like condition. So if you have specific locations, we can take that back to Public Works and identify whether they felt they met one of those 4 criteria, if they got a variance for it, or if they just didn't know better.
Okay.
Thanks, John. I think we have a couple more questions before we move on.
I have one.
Mark,
I live up on Commonwealth Avenue, corner of Harvard and Commonwealth Avenue. And my question is, if a person's in the crosswalk and a car goes by, the car has to stop and allow the person to finish his way through the crosswalk. The trolleys there don't do that. Maneuvering across the tracks there, the asphalt is riding up past the track. So a person with mobility issues, has to maneuver slowly. The trolleys don't wait. As soon as the light change or you're closing it or they're ready to go, they hit that bell and they zoom. And I'm standing in the middle of a crosswalk because I can't make it across as fast as other people. Not only can I make it across, maneuvering across, because of my ankles get really troubled, I have to watch where I'm going. Is that same rule that when someone's in a crosswalk apply to a trolley driver as well as it does to a car driver?
So I don't know the answer to that at all, but I can certainly find out, and maybe I'll know better next week. But I would imagine that the rule is that if someone's in your way, you shouldn't run them over. But that area is under consideration, so there's a ComAv project up to that area. So that area is getting part of the ComAv 3 and 4 project. So that project will be reviewed because accessibility and moving across those intersections is a major problem for everyone, really. And I think you have like 6 or 8 things happening at once at one section of a light anyway. So I don't know the answer officially, but that area is in development and design through Public Works. And typically those projects are coordinated heavily with the T and upgrading those crossings.
When you say development, you know where they put the
The rubber.
I'm not. Pardon me.
she said rubber.
I'm not sure what they call it, but it's like a little path or that you can go across that street without having to go up and down and not breaking your ankles. Is that part of in the works with that, or something like that?
It's complete reconstruction of ComAv. It'll be building face to building face, meaning that the sidewalks will be all new, the roadway, everything.
level,
It's
yeah.
completely getting redesigned. The amount of space to each is getting redeveloped, so it's a nuts and bolts project.
That's good to know.
That is. Thank you
good
very
to know.
much.
So you should keep your eye out for community meetings for that area as well.
Yeah, I live right there on Commonwealth Avenue. Yeah, I will.
That's great. And Allegra?
2 questions. One, what's the timeline for that, for ComAv?
So they have a community meeting coming up, which I can have Jessica send you the information for. I imagine that it will probably still be 2 years out total, because there's a lot of coordination that has to happen. But so they do a lot of the design and planning, and then it has to go through all of the agencies' comment and review, and then it has to go through the budgeting. So it's not an immediate thing.
Okay, thank you. And then also I wanted to say that that's so exciting about the mapping technology. I think that that'll be a real boon to the community. And so is the idea to go directly towards pushing Google Maps to incorporate that into their technology, or is the idea to create a separate app first?
My big hope is that Google will adopt it as part of their application, because I feel that's the tool everyone already automatically uses, or at least I do. So I'd rather not create yet another app. I mean, to ride the T alone, you have to download 3 apps. People aren't going to know about it if they have to download yet another app. So my big hope is that it can get adopted into Google Maps, and if Google Maps doesn't want to adopt it, then we can apply to or appeal to Apple, who's also trying to really encourage users to use their Apple mapping tool, which hasn't been a big hit, but our backup. Don't tell them I said that.
Carl?
Thank you.
I'm
It's on
sorry.
TV.
I know.
Are you done, Allegra?
Yes, thanks.
Well, I happen to know the head of accessibility for both Apple and Google. I mean, if you want to put something together, I can forward it to them and see if that's something they would want to adapt as part of their, Google Map.
Yeah, so when the students are done around December 1st. We're going to go back to Google. So probably then we would want to include the person from Accessibility for Google. So previously we were communicating with someone from their GovReach program, which is basically they have a program where people can volunteer their time to make private tools or do government projects, but they didn't feel like this was a good fit for it. So certainly we can go back. And then initially we didn't have enough information to convey what we really wanted, so they sort of brushed it off because they thought it was a two-dimensional mapping, which exists throughout Google already. Several cities already have the two-dimensional maps identified, which is not what I want at all. My hope is that this can really be an interactive, if I'm here, I want to go there, where are the barriers and how do I get around them, rather than I'm off the two-dimensional map, it doesn't help me. Any other questions?
Any other questions, thoughts? Okay. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna miss you.
Yes.
She will be missed. Okay, so we're going to move on to old business, and that would be the House Bill 1020 and Senate Bill 1323.
Heather, can I just ask? I think we
Sure.
have a presentation, and they wanted to
Oh,
go on
sure,
at 6.
Sure. Okay. This is for the VSA, MBTA?
Maybe they can tell us a little bit
Okay,
about where
sure.
they're from.
Hi, I'm Karen Goodfellow. I'm actually the director of the Boston Art Commission, so I work right downstairs.
Daniel Tufik, I work with BRA. I'm a project manager here in the technology department.
What's your name again?
Daniel Tufik.
So we're here less for presentation and more for a conversation and hopefully an invitation to collaborate on a public art project that I've been working on. So as I said, I'm the director of the Boston Art Commission, and basically that means I manage the city's public art program. And we've been working to expand that program and sort of increase our public art collection, both through temporary and permanent installations throughout the city. And we're really looking to, with this project, expand it even further. So we've been working primarily with visual projects on almost everything we do, and we've recently been exploring different projects using technology, and we've become interested in doing audio projects. And thought it might be a nice time to start talking to you all. We've been in conversation with the MBTA. It actually sprung from a project I was already speaking to them about, to do projects at Government Center, which I'm not sure is going to end up working right now because of budgetary reasons. But we still have an opportunity potentially to do an audio project there. So one thing we think about a lot in public art is trying to improve sort of the visual presentation of the city and the environment, and often overlooked in that is the sort of experience we have through our audio and our listening environment and how that is affecting us day to day. And so we're exploring different ways to do that, and one way to do that has been, and Daniel can speak to this a little bit, to potentially change some of the sounds we hear on the T. So things that I ride the T every day, I'm sure many of you do as well. It can be a really stressful environment, and I think it provokes a lot of anxiety and ridership. And so we were hoping first to look at potentially a whole suite of ways to do this, and all the different sounds we hear there. But one project in particular would be to change the sound that you hear when you enter the gateway or the turnstiles when you come in and out. There's an opportunity there because the MBTA will be making some changes to their whole system this summer. And so I had a conversation with Daniel sort of casually about a project he'd heard about, and I thought it'd be a great thing to to try to expand with the project we were already doing with the MBTA on public art and exploring technology.
Do you have an example of an audio art project?
So the idea for this particular one is replacing the current turnstile or gateway.
Could you use the mic?
Oh, sorry. It's replacing the current suite of sounds that the gateway or turnstile does in the MBTA, and instead using a more melodic approach to that. Instead of this cacophonous kind of yelling at you that you didn't use your MBTA card appropriately, or this positive but not quite very melodic response that says, you did use it right, please go ahead. The idea would be to use a more melodic approach where you would use maybe a G major chord, in which there's a lot of studies that show that using one chord in particular will make a more positive experience while writing or while exploring the world around you.
Can you demonstrate? No,
I could.
Have other cities done this?
I don't think you want us to.
Have other cities done this yet?
New York is in talks with a very famous musician, James Murphy, on implementing in the MTA system down there.
And is this envisioned as a temporary or permanent?
So this would be permanent.
Sure.
Sorry. So this would hopefully be permanent. So as I said, we've had conversations with the MBTA. I had talked to Charlie at VSA about it, and we were hoping to work with you to really put together like a user group to field test some different options we might develop. So we don't have samples yet because we wanted to work collaboratively to develop them. We've played around a little bit with it, but we're hoping to if you're interested, get you involved early. There are a lot of commissions at the city, and we don't often work together. And this might be, a fun way to do that. So again, this hasn't really been shaped yet, so we don't have anything to present.
Can I recommend something?
Yep.
Because it's sound related, you might also think about involving groups of folks that are sensitive to sounds, like people with autism.
Yep.
I think that's really important because, not every sound is pleasant to every ear, obviously,
Right.
but especially with that group because they're so hypersensitive. If you could take that into account.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really good advice.
Carl?
And I was gonna bring up that very point Valerie brought up, but I was also gonna say, I'd love to get some blind folks, and maybe Kyle and I could work with you on that, involved in being user testers, because we wanna make sure it doesn't throw off their sense of orientation, listening for where the cars are coming from, or the announcement, or that sort of thing too, because there's a lot of sounds when you walk into a MBTA station.
Yep. Yeah, and we definitely want to improve that experience, not confuse it further. And we want to make sure, even though we have good intentions, we don't want to, do something wrong that makes things worse.
Yeah, I remember when the T got into wrapping their buses as ads, and one of the things that we pointed out was that for people with traumatic brain injury or intellectual disabilities, what the bus looks like is a very distinct cue that people rely on. And the minute you change the appearance of one, it throws people off. So I think it's important to, I'm glad you're coming early. And I think it's important that whatever you do, be system-wide in some way so that those who rely on the cues, and the cue is consistent. It's one of the issues being worked on now with crosswalks, because we have 1,000 different sounds, and literally if you go from one area to another, the sounds are different, and people rely on those cues. So I'm glad you're coming early, and I think it's an interesting idea.
Great. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question? What's the public art on the side of the Hancock Tower?
Okay, I'll take that. So that is curated by Pedro Alonso, who's a local independent curator. He did that Ojemios, he curated that Ojemios mural on Dewey Square a couple years ago that everybody got really upset about and said it looked like a terrorist. So he's been fantastic. He brought Shepard Fairey here a couple years before that, so he's been bringing really exciting projects to Boston. We're really lucky to have him, but he was hired by Boston Properties to do 3 temporary public art projects in that building, and they're basically trying to make their building stand out, to be more competitive to renters, I guess. But that was the third of the three, and so I think the other two are coming down, and it's by an artist named JR, who is a street artist who's done work all over the world, is quite well known. And I will say they also, you shouldn't have asked me, in coordination with that, they brought this truck called the Inside Out truck to both Dudley Square Library and to Back Bay Station. And you might see some portraits that were taken. They went and they took photos of people in the truck and just wheat pasted them up, both at the Dudley Square Library and the Back Bay, the Orange Line T Station.
That is a great project. I think I saw Liz, took pictures, Liz Hardy Jackson. It was put on the Facebook, so yes, very familiar with that project.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different projects happening now. We just installed 3 new permanent ones in the bowling building in Dudley Square, and one of them, that did have me thinking about this more and more was a piece that is using sort of information sent to the city through constituent engagement using the 311 or Citizens Connect or different calls made to the city. And the lights in the sculpture are relaying that information to viewers, and then you can tweet to it, and it will create a light response. So we are more and more exploring technology, and I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities in the future. So maybe this can be a collaboration, but there might be others, that we should look at as well.
I have one more question.
Sorry.
Do you have any kind of ideas about mobile art? So I hear that everything you're thinking about is more permanent, but maybe areas where you could have temporary placement of, like, even visual art, and most, have some of it represented by artists with disabilities. I don't know if you even highlight the artists on these arts.
We try to. The issue with temporary art has often been that there's not a lot of funding available for it. So as you might know, the city doesn't have a budget line for these things. With the bowling building, it was the first time we were able to use capital funds for a public art project, which was really a big deal and a big step for us. But we're trying to fund some more temporary projects, but we don't have a budget line for it, and most grant funders won't do temporary. So I think there's a shift happening in the city right now where a lot of the museums are stepping up, but it's not maybe happening as quickly as we'd all like.
Carl?
So if I hear what you're looking for tonight,
Yep.
is that you're looking for the commission to participate with your group on being user experience testers, is that correct?
Yes.
So how can we make sure that happens? Can we have Kristen's office maybe send you all our emails and
That'd
you
be
work with us?
wonderful.
Or I guess I want to make sure there are that we just don't talk
Yeah.
about it, that there are concrete steps when we're done with.
Yeah.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions, everyone. Okay, so now we can move on to old business, and that's the House bill, the support letter. And has everyone had a chance to read that over? Okay. And so do I hear a motion to approve the letter the way it's written?
What are we reading?
And this is
over?
regarding I'm sorry?
Can you refresh my memory?
Sure. This is regarding House Bill 1012, and I think it's changed over to...
And these are the letters that Allegra wrote.
I'm sorry?
Did you write these letters, Allegra?
What?
Did you write these letters?
No.
I believe Jessica wrote it.
Oh, okay, yes.
This is for Support Bill 1323, an act relative to the Architectural Access Board.
Okay.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
So
Motion
we'll
passed.
send that out.
I'm sorry?
We'll send that out.
Yes.
Great,
Great.
thank you.
Okay. And we move on to old action items. I don't think we have any, do we?
Just the letter, I think.
Just a letter, right? Okay.
On our agenda, it mentions House Bill 1012 and Senate Bill 1323. Is this
I think
both of them, or are there two letters?
I think that's its second iteration. I think the first one, from what I recall, It was House Bill 1012. Yeah.
I can confirm that with Jessica tomorrow. I'll let you know.
Yeah, because that was the email I sent out last week, and it was in the draft that we sent.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Oh, well, no, we just had that presentation. New action items? Do we have new action items?
Commissioner, so what is the plan for a new Catherine?
I will be trying to post it in the next few weeks, so I'll spread it widely. It would have to be a Boston resident. Catherine's has an architectural degree, so ideally I'd be looking for that and someone who has experience with accessibility.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the time lag and that we have made progress with PIC and with
I'm going to try to expedite it.
ERA, and that Catherine's been a very good burr in their saddle, and I'm worried that they will get used to not having that pressure and it'll have to start all over again.
I don't think Kristen is gonna let that happen.
Well, Catherine's made some really good connections, so they all know the message.
So 2 things. One, we have a meeting on November 3rd to present to all the project managers and go through the accessibility checklist and introduce them to Chanel. And actually, Daniel, who is here, is from the BRA. He has a technical component to his job, so he's going to change the contact information to say disability@boston.gov, so those will still be coming through our office rather than my contact information. And then we've also already requested that both Kristen and Chanel are invited to all the pre-file meetings. So all of the project managers know and have them on the distribution list. So my hope is that momentum is not lost through the BRA. And then PIC, we are extremely close with them. We have the Sidewalk Cafe design guidelines and policy in place. I've already talked to Kristen about pursuing a pedestrian easement policy. So those projects are still getting reviewed by Chanel and Kristen as well. So our hope is that the mechanisms are in place so that in my absence, things are not lost.
I agree, though, we need to expedite filling this position.
And what, I may have missed it at previous meetings, but what was the plan, if any, for the deputy commissioner for Jesse's position?
That's still pending review with the Personnel Review Committee. But I have a meeting set up next week to discuss all my positions in my office, because we'll be down 2 positions, and then we're also down a board position.
Yes.
So I have to get busy.
I thought the deputy commissioner was being absorbed.
It may be.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I still have some candidates who applied for the board position when we appointed Kim Yada. So I'm going to go back and revisit those resumes. There was one candidate who met some of the target areas we'd like to hit as far as being youth and certain neighborhoods and certain disabilities. So I'm going to reach out to those people and see if they're still interested.
That's good.
Right.
Good. Allegra?
Can you just remind me what PIC stands for?
It's the Public Improvement Commission. It's a city group that reviews anything that happens to the sidewalks.
Great.
Any construction, reconstruction, any work.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Kyle, you had your hand up? Oh, okay. All righty. Is that it for action items? All righty. We'll move on to public input. Anybody from the public want to speak? Okay. And I think that's it.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
So the 19th, right?
I thought, I was for sure that people wanted to speak. Hey, wow. Is that what it is?
What?
I should know this, right? Because my dad and, yeah.